Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Australia. Good evening, Latin America. My name is Mario Cortez Santander from the social organization United for Colombia Australia from Sydney. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands we all work and live in, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia, as well as the First Nations of the land some of you might be coming from, and very especially to the Indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant communities in our beloved Abya Latin America. Likewise, we would like to pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never been ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. United for Colombia Australia is an independent social organization in Australia that seeks to generate process of awareness and reflection with the local and international community on the social and political reality of Colombia and Latin America. To all people joining us today, thank you for sharing your time and solidarity with this webinar, which originally meant to happen face-to-face, combined with a cultural and artistic activity, EXPRESARTE for Colombia, the second edition. Will be postponed until further notice due to the last COVID outbreak in Sydney. Since 28th of April this year, the long-standing social unrest in Colombia has been exacerbated and massive social protest has been taking place in various parts of the country. The protests have been expressions of art, academic and symbolic resistance, denouncing structural problems, human rights violations, and against vulnerable communities, but also desire for a new country. Unfortunately, there has been escalation of violence that has shadowed and distorted the real intention with the protesters. Therefore, we would like to make an urgent appeal to the national and international community, governments, and organizations that ensure compliance with and defense of human rights and international humanitarian law, to focus their attention on Colombia to guarantee the life and safety of the people. Art is a peaceful and inspiring resistance in the most valuable tool for change. There is not country without art, and Colombia, the legendary Colombia, has a profound diversity that is art in itself, which must be remembered and kept alive and free. We hope this webinar could help us to get some valuable outcomes to understand better how art made in protest can influence social change. For that purpose, I would like to introduce Carolina Triana, who will direct this panel. Carolina is a sociologist and cultural strategist with 16 years experience in the art and cultural sector in Australia and in Colombia. Awarded in 2017 with the Premier's Multicultural Community Medal from New South Wales, her work supporting artists and communities of refugee and migrant backgrounds with Settlement Service International. She's currently pursuing a PhD in Immigration Studies. We salute and thank all participants and hope you all enjoy this moment. For all of you guys, thank you for taking the time to talk about Colombia, and for everyone who is behind the screen, stay strong, sit down and pay attention with these wonderful people. Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mario. Hello, everyone. I'm Carolina Triana. Before we begin, I also would like to acknowledge the traditional lands, the traditional owners of the lands in which we're meeting today. I'm zooming in from the lands of the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I also would like to extend that respect to any Indigenous peoples joining us from every part of the world today. Welcome to all our speakers. Thank you very much again for joining us today. As Mario said, we had to move this from an in-person encounter to a virtual encounter, which is very much what we've been doing in the last few years. And I would like to acknowledge that Sydney is going into or has just entered a 2-week lockdown. So I hope everyone is safe and well, but I also would like to acknowledge the many artists, organizations, producers, freelance and casual workers who have been affected, heavily affected because this lockdown. So my solidarity is with you. And I hope that we're gonna go through all this really together. Well, we're here today to discuss the links between arts or the relationship between arts and activism, as Mario has mentioned before. This topic is in part a response to the current situation in Colombia, where widespread protests started 2 months ago. And art, the arts and culture have taken a very predominant role in those protests, in those manifestations of civil engagement with the political self. We're going to reflect on the role of arts in this context and beyond. We have the privilege of having here not only Colombian boards in the panel, but we have here a wide range of people with various backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, but also academic and artistic backgrounds. So I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion unpacking the elements that link arts with social change. So welcome again. Bear with me. Hopefully Wi-Fi connections that all working, but be patient and enjoy. Have a nice cup of tea or coffee, and let's start. I'm going to introduce each of the speakers. So if you could please wait, although everyone has their names very beautifully on your screen, so everyone will know who you are. But I'm going to introduce you all very quickly, and then we'll go into the questions, if that's okay with everyone. All right, so I'd like to introduce Valentina Celis. Valentina is a dancer and choreographer and studio owner based in Sydney. She's originally from Colombia. Valentina is also a nutritionist dietitian from the University of Antioquia. She has also coordinated nutritional recovery programs for children for NGOs working in the most vulnerable locations in the country. Welcome, Valentina, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina.
Then we have Dr. Justo Díaz, my old friend Justo. Great to see you again, Justo. Justo
Hi,
is
Carolina.
an educator, visual artist, and a legend in the art sector here in Sydney and New South Wales. Justo was the New South Wales Multicultural Music Coordinator at Carnivale Festival and music director in Café Carnivale, which is where I had the pleasure to work with Justo for 3 years. Justo has also a PhD from the Western Sydney University, which he obtained in 2010. Then we have Guillermo. Hello, Guillermo, and welcome. Guillermo is an award-winning filmmaker in several international and national film festivals. He's a graduate of the Australian Film, Television and Radio School and has worked with organizations such as UNICEF and Amnesty International as well. So thank you again, Guillermo.
Hola.
Hola, Guillermo. Carlos Agames. Carlos is a Colombian interdisciplinary artist and graphic designer working here in Sydney. He's the recipient of UNESCO Ashburn Scholarship and has exhibited his work across multiple exhibitions in Sydney, including exhibitions at 107 and the Maritime Museum very recently in January this year. Thank you again for joining us, Carlos.
Hello, hola.
Dr. Fernanda Peñalosa, a senior lecturer in Latin American Studies, and Fernanda is also the chair of the Department of Spanish and Latin American Students at the University of Sydney. She's a scholar in Latin American Studies, as I was saying, and it's a pleasure to have you here, Fernanda. Welcome.
Muchas gracias, Carolina. Hola a todos y todas.
And we have also Sarah Mota, Professor Sarah Mota, mother, poet, political theorist, popular educator, and a scholar at the University of Newcastle. Thank you again, Sarah, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to meet you. This is the first time that we actually, besides all the email exchange that we have had in preparation for this panel, that we made. It's a pleasure to meet you, and welcome again, Sarah.
Thank you. Gracias.
Okay, welcome everyone as well. If you're just joining the live on Facebook, I hope you're well, and we're going to now kick off with the discussion with opening questions to each of the panelists. For the speakers, if you would like to comment on any of those different elements that will come up during the discussion, feel free to do so. Just wave to me and I will know that you would like to speak. And then we'll have a bit of time for an open discussion. Hopefully we can also get some questions from the audience who are joining us on Facebook. So for the audience, if you have any burning questions, comments, please put them on the comments of your live feed, and we'll get to, well, we'll try to get to them during the discussions. We're going to have a little bit longer than 1 hour to go through the discussion. Okay, so we're going to start with Valentina. Valentina, you recently produced a dance video bringing together dozens of dancers performing to the song El Aguante from Calle 13, well-known Calle 13 and important supporters of social movements in Latin America. You brought together all these dancers to perform at Sydney Landmarks, and this video was published on social media along with Q&A that you developed as a response to, well, disseminate information about what was happening or still happening in Colombia. What was your intention behind those pieces, both the video and the Q&A? And why do you think it's important for artists to speak up in times of political and social crisis?
Hello, Carolina. Thanks so much for your invitation to start. I'm so happy to be here with these talented people. Well, it was basically, the intention was just to share information in the international area, because I could see that some social content was being like blocked in Colombia. I could see that most of the content was in Spanish. And I was talking with people in Australia and from other countries, and I could see that no one had idea of what was happening. And it's kind of hard to catch attention from people when it's just like a massive text talking about other country in a confusing language. So when you show graphic or artistic content, it's entertaining. Yeah, so it's kind of a way to catch attention. Yeah, my intention was to do something to share for people in Australia and other countries. And when we created the text, which I did with a politologist in Colombia, that was basically the main goal. It was sharing that text, and I would say that the video was kind of the way to get to it. But yeah, like I believe the artists, we have extra resources to do to take actions with these social and political situations. Unfortunately, there's some one of the problems where we don't all get involved in these topics or take the responsibility to have a position and vote and do something about the problems is because some people is just lazy about it, you know. If it's not entertaining, if it's not likable, they don't do anything. And it's also like probably a sensation of resignation. Yeah, but when it comes to art, there is entertainment in the middle, and there is like catching emotions from people and making it look beautiful in a non-aggressive way. So I believe it's very important as artists to use this resource that we have to entertain, to give message in another way apart of words, just to give some credibility to these movements and activism that we have to do for the bad political situation in third world countries like Colombia or any other country.
Thank you, Valentina. Well, it's really interesting what you said. Well, firstly, how we can disseminate information about what's going on, what's happening, or our perception of what's going on in other languages other than Spanish. And it's a way, it's something that we hopefully are going to, well, going through during the discussion, is how those narratives are created and how the dominant narrative or the dominant narratives can sometimes be the narratives, obviously, that will get disseminated many times as the truth. And art, in many cases, particularly around social movements and in situations such as Colombia, where we're going through a very worrying and concerning political crisis, how art also can be that vehicle to tell the truth. I guess for me, it would be really interesting to unpack what the truth is and how those different perspectives will come together. So thank you, Valentina. I hope we're ready to show your video. I'm sure. Okay, okay, we're good to go.
Podemos hablar, ¿no?
I think it's meant to have music, but I think the music is not going through.
Well, you can still find it on YouTube if someone wants to see it with the music. And again,
I can hear the music now.
Valentina, tell us where the dancers come from. How did you engage them? Are they all Colombian? Are they Latin American? Did they have a particular interest in participating in the video because of that cultural connection? Or what was the reason for those dancers to join in?
well, I'm a dance teacher. So for example, these dancers right now, they're my students. Some of them were just my students that I invited them to be part of it. I told them, and pretty much the ones that had the time availability and they felt connected with the cause, they decided to do it. Definitely everyone was connected with the cause and the situation of Colombia behind it. We have a girl from Africa, from Thailand, and from Chile there, also from Spain. We're only 2 Colombians in that shot, for example. Well, these are Colombian girls as well. We had a massive help from Colombian Folkloric Organization. Sandra, the director, she put a bunch of dancers together for me as well, and some lovely costumes. So she helped a lot. There is Sandra. So yeah, it was pretty much not just Colombian dancers, and I kind of contacted leaders from different dance groups, and they contacted their own dancers, and I also put my dancers together. For example, in this shot, we have the Colombian Folkloric Organization. That's the choreography I created, and they kind of did a transformation of the choreography with the skirts, which is beautiful. And then this is my people and some other hip hop dancers. For example, one of the guys at the front, he's an Aussie. Very good dancer that felt moved with the cause and was very excited about it. We have, she's from Kazakhstan, the Asian girl. So it's quite interesting that all the people we had was quite multicultural. At the back, it's a Peruvian guy that did the hip hop part as well for us. These are Brazilians, the couple that danced. So yeah, it was definitely a full teamwork from people from different backgrounds. And it was quite interesting because everyone did a sacrifice to be part of these. Everyone had to ask to leave early from work, or just invest a whole day filming. So it was quite moving how everyone was touched by the cause and supported me to do this with the last notice, because some people I told them like 2 days before the film day. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that's great to hear, right? Like how those networks of solidarity with different causes across the world happen in a city like Sydney or in any other part of the world, and how, you know, musicians, dancers, artists, or citizens are really willing to understand what's happening and are really to put in some time or resources into getting the word or the truth that we were talking before out. So thank you, Valentina, for sharing the video. You can find the video on YouTube, but I'm sure United for Colombia for Australia will also post the video on their page so everyone can see it with the music on as well. So thank you again for sharing, Valentina, and for
Carolina.
this space as well.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go into the realm of music. We have a musician here on the panel to talk about the role of music in protest and beyond. So, Justo, across Latin America, the globe, music has been a tool widely used by activists and also other political actors, as well as government, to garner support for causes. It is the power of music to mobilize people that make it a tool feared by dictatorships and other repressive regimes. And we have seen this, and there are multiple examples of this across the world. Where do you think that power comes from? As a musician, and in your opinion, what is the role that musicians should or could play in the context of widespread protests such as the ones happening in Colombia, Chile, or any other social revolts that are happening around the globe?
Hello, Carolina. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. The question is quite difficult. You're asking me about the role of the musician, and I decided to go to the real legends. Then I chose 4 songs from different people, different composers from Latin America, and it doesn't mean that other composers don't have songs. Like I'm going to talk only about 4 of them. One of them is Horacio Guarani. Horacio Guarani has a song called Si se calla el cantor. If the singer is silent or silenced, you know, and he thinks that if the singer is silent, the life is silent, because life is a song, as you know, that where is going to be hope, light. I'm reading in Spanish. Where is going to be the hope, the light, the happiness? Where are they going to go, the workers of the port? Who's going to struggle for their salaries? That's Horacio Guarani perspective. But we have people like Victor Jara and his song Manifesto. Really, all these songs are manifestos. And Victor Jara says that he doesn't sing just for singing. Yo no canto por cantar ni por tener buena voz. He doesn't sing just for singing or because he has a good voice. He sings because the guitar has sense and reason. And it's not a guitar for rich people, and that the song has sense because some people will die singing the truth. We have to say that Victor Jara actually died for what he believed. He was killed in the coup in Chile. You know, as many people have been killed today in Chile, in Colombia, and in many other countries for saying what they think. Another song is by Pablo Milanés from Cuba. It's called Pobre del Cantor, Pity the Singer. And he's a poor, pity the singer of nowadays that doesn't risk a string in order to not to risk his life, to save his life. He says that one day we were deceived, today we are alive, you know? That's Pablo Milanés' perspective. And the last one I'm going to quote is by Carlos Puebla, a song called Soy del Pueblo, I am from the people, where he says, I am from the people, and wherever the people takes me, I go. Because he says, cantar es mi oficio, to sing is my trade, and I sing to the strong effort to build the future with a happy sacrifice. He says that he's going around the people, listen to the feelings. I pick it up and I give it back in a song. And he says, I give a little, but I give it with happiness to the people. I give my song because I belong to the people. Okay, what is the role of the musician? For me, the role of the musician is a role of an educator. I come from the tradition of Paulo Freire in Latin America. I'm gonna come from a tradition of education. I believe the music has an educational role. All the arts have an educational role. Music is one of them. I believe I'm actually closer to Carlos Puebla because he says that what's the role of the musician? I don't think the musician is that important. I think it's important the struggle, and in many different ways we are part of that struggle. The artist, like any human being, is sensitive to whatever is happening in reality and respond to that reality. You asked me how would I react in the situation of Colombia and Chile today. In order to respond that, I will have to be in Colombia or Chile, and I will be responding, I suppose, in the way the situation requires. I think artists have to respond. Artists are sensitive people. Everybody's sensitive, but we have responsibilities because, as you mentioned, art is music. You mentioned music is a powerful tool. Through art, we are alienated every day. Like the economical system we live in, that's a neoliberal economical system, is every day sending us music, is, my word, is alienating us with music, is invading us with music, with a powerful message. Our response as musicians is to understand that, as an artist, is understand that situation and try to respond the better way we can. Some people will do it like Horacio Guarani, believing that what they do is the most, the sublime kind of commitment to the people. Other people will say that humbly, I do whatever I can, not because I have a good voice, Other people will say, poor of you if you don't commit to the situation. And other people would say, I come from the people, I respond to whatever. And if it's a concert, if it's a webinar, or it's whatever, we respond committing our message or our understanding of the situation with honesty and trying to sort of help people to get closer to a sort of a critical analysis of the reality. I don't know, I think that's what I would like to say about your question. I hope I responded to all your demands.
Thank you, Justo. Yes, you definitely did. And I think you have highlighted a couple of really important elements in the discussion. One is responsibility. I think I wonder, I'm a cultural worker. I'm not an artist myself, but I worked with artists. I have worked with artists all my professional life. And I always wonder, what is my responsibility as a cultural worker in the world? Of course, my professional responsibility is supporting artists to show their work to audiences. But beyond that, what is my responsibility to the people, to the world? So I think you have touched there a really, really important questions that I think we are all continuously asking ourselves, but it's really important that we keep asking that questions, whether you're an artist or not, whether you are, analyst, or you are an architect, or you are a politician, you're an artist. We all have responsibility. So I think that's important. And the other bit that you also mentioned was the role of education, of educating people, which is interesting because that's something that I can see is already a transversal theme in the discussion. When Valentina was talking about what the responsibility that she felt on disseminating the situation, or raising awareness about the situation happening in Colombia through the video and the information piece that she created with her colleague back in Colombia about what was happening. So that's also an important bit. And I really, I mean, when you were mentioning the different singers and the songs in your intervention, I was thinking, wow, I mean, all these songs, for me, what they really do is that they put into words what I would like to say. I mean, I'm not, as I was saying, I'm not a singer. I don't have a voice, a beautiful voice to share at least. And what musicians do is that they put into words, into lyrics, what I would like to articulate to the world. And I have seen that in the very last 2 months with even Colombians living here in Sydney who have written words and have shared, songs, and have shared those songs with fellow Colombians, with fellow Latin Americans, and how that identification with songs is so strong because they, in a way, put into the public realm what I want to share with others, how I feel, how I want to express myself. So I think that's really interesting how the power of the songs really make you share that collective feeling, if you like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can I add something else?
Sure.
Who does the music belong to? Like, it belongs to the musicians, to the professional musicians, to the composers, to those people who sing the songs, to those people who listen to the songs, or to those people that are inspired by the songs. I think our role, as you said, we are somehow tools. Musicians are tools, composers are tools. We represent somehow reality, and we somehow give it back to people. Once the music is out, it really belongs to the same people. That's why you see in marches, people that are not musicians. Well, it's not only music. It could apply to every single art expression. People who are not musicians are singing the songs, are dancing the songs, and they're carrying the message someone else. And sometimes they even changing the words of the songs to make it more appropriate for the situations they're living. Then who does, who owns the music? Who owns the music? Who owns the struggle? That's the question I would like to leave for the rest of the panel as well.
Thank you so much, Justo. I think they're very important questions, and hopefully we can unpack some of those elements. So from music, we're going into film. We have a filmmaker on the panel, Guillermo. Hello, Guillermo. Hola, de nuevo. So you're a filmmaker who has placed human rights at the core of your work. Why, or do you think that films can make people take action?
Hola, hello. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Carolina, for including me in the panel. As I said, I'm so honored to be here in discussion with all these amazing artists and professors and wonderful people who are contributing to social change in so many ways. And thank you also to the people that are watching. Hello, thank you. Look, in terms of social change, yes. Film, my immediate response is yes. Film can be a catalyst for social change, and I will outline a few examples later on where I think it has made some great inroads into social justice, and more so with films that have been produced here in Australia. Now, our problem as filmmakers is there's so much content now. People are streaming, they're on social media, their eyeballs are glued, the attention is fragmented. How do we break through? How do we tell our stories? And today, we're not just couch potatoes anymore. We're constantly on our phone. We're potatoes everywhere. We're potatoes on the train, potatoes on the bus. We're walking potatoes. we're in the toilet, potatoes, you know, it's just a blight of potatoes. We're always online, always, you know, consuming content. And so for filmmakers now, the question is, how do we create reach? How do we engage? And then how do we tell our stories? How do we help people to, you know, to activate people to be a part of the conversation, which is very, very important. And, you know, also, and our, you know, our audience is being segmented through analytics and metrics and targeted through advertising, and people are constantly being battered with information. And so we as filmmakers who don't have the means of distribution at all, how do we connect? How do we connect with our audience in an active way, that is not just content to consume, but content to engage with, to be a part of? And, you know, today technology has been democratized, you know, and there's a hope for impact of change. Pick up a mobile phone, make a film, you know, make a film. And, you know, and with that way we can be catalysts for change. You know, what is a filmmaker today? And what we shoot is driven by the choices we make. You know, we're all filmmakers. Where do we place the camera? What audio do we record? When do we start? When do we stop? What music do we do? We're filmmakers. And we're filmmakers who've shared footage and shared change with the Arab Spring. Yes, the Velvet Revolution. Yes, we have a 17-year-old Daniela Fraser who filmed the murder of George Floyd, 8 minutes of footage on a smartphone, which transformed society and engaged people, made them active. And that country there is undergoing an enormous change, which of course is reverberating across the world. Filmmakers can make social change through the catalyst of the storytelling. They have the power for social change. And also, you know, what is human rights? I've come to a broader understanding of human rights now, working with organizations such as Amnesty International and UNICEF. And human rights for me is what I term as being full realm. You know, we were talking about prisoners of conscience, we were talking about all of this, but what is it to be a human being, and what is it to explore the potential? What is it for you to seek your joy and your happiness? You know, and for me, I call that full realm, a full realm of human rights. And that is embracing all sorts of things. You know, it's not just about free speech, it's about clean water, it's about the air, it's about also the, you know, the right to die where you choose. It's about the right to be gender fluid. And filmmakers are addressing all of these issues in so many ways, in social media, in GIFs, in long form, in short form, creating dialogue. And my last short film was called Last Goodbye, and it was partly also about choosing how to die, where to die, and having the dignity of choosing where to die. And it also explored, you know, what I think a lot of filmmakers are doing is, film is the seventh art, so explore sculpture, photography, all sorts of elements, and to combine that into a multi-form is what really excites me, as well as generating conversation and engagement. Now, in terms of films that have really cut through and created change, one example is, you might be aware of the documentary called Girl in the River, The Price of Forgiveness. It's a documentary about a Pakistani woman who survived an honor killing. And this short documentary was created and it won an Oscar in 2016 for a short film documentary, and it influenced the then Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to pass legislation against honor killings, anti-rape laws, etc. There were a lot of changes that were made, and you know, and filmmakers are catalysts for change. And hopefully, I can share a link with that. You can watch the film on YouTube. So hopefully, we can share that also. And closer to change, I know Carolina is aware of this. These wonderful filmmakers created a documentary called Staging Post, and I can share a link with that too. And it's about refugees who were trying to come, who were boat people trying to come to Australia, who are now stranded in Indonesia, looking for all sorts of human rights support. And it was created by an Australian filmmaker, Joel, working with Hazara refugees, Mustafa and Kadim. And it's about asylum seekers in limbo. And they've gone a step further. Not only have they created a very engaging, interesting, thought-provoking film, they've also toured the film around the world, engaged audiences. So the filmmaking doesn't stop at the end of the credits for filmmakers. It continues for filmmakers of that caliber who want to be able to contribute to the conversation. They tour the film, they engage with people from all walks of life, empowering people, having conversations, and at the grassroots level, engaging and giving people that information and that access to that information so they can also participate in the conversation. And as a filmmaker, it's about, for me, it's about participation in the conversation. It's not just about my art, it's about engaging with an audience. Where do we take our audience in terms of opening doors, opening opportunities for them to be part of the discussion? And that's, hopefully I can also have a link there for that. You can download the film. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Another example, which I really love in Australia, is a documentary called In My Blood It Runs, about a 10-year-old Aboriginal boy, Arente Dawa boy, Dujan, and his story. And that's about human rights and social justice, Indigenous youth and education, incarceration, and again, a way to engage people. This film was crowdfunded. $1 million was gained from crowdfunding. So it involved people right at the beginning, before the film was created. It involved people to be a part of this conversation and to make it a reality. So right from the beginning, and then the film has been shared, and the filmmakers have taken the film across Australia to engage in discussion. So, as I said, filmmaking for social justice, social change doesn't stop at the credits. People of that caliber take the stories further. And all of these films have one thing in common. They tell very unique personal stories within the context of greater social injustice. And that way engage an audience through personal stories. And I think that is key. That is key. No one lifts their hands for causes anymore, but they lift their hands for somebody that they care about, that they engage with. And that's an entry point. And we as filmmakers, I think, can reach out more for those kinds of stories where we engage on personal journeys, on struggles, on resilience. Those kinds of stories help us understand the greater causes. And I think we can do that more as filmmakers, and hopefully I can share more of those threads. I'll stop talking soon, but I think those, for examples, give a clear indication that film can make change and be a catalyst for change, insofar as it also engages an audience in a participatory way, that they can contribute, they have access to change, and the filmmakers provide opportunities and windows for people to be a part of the discussion. So as long as we're engaging our audience through visual, through the art, through all of that, but also in the back end, what do we do after that as filmmakers? How do we involve our audience? I think that's very key, because filmmakers are just catalysts. They're catalysts, and they ask questions. We don't necessarily always provide answers. That's not it's not what we do. We ask questions, and hopefully people from all walks of life can help to answer those questions and work towards making it a reality. So thank you. That's my stuff.
Thank you, Guillermo. I think you have also touched really interesting points there. I was thinking as you were speaking about the really important role that the film image has had in Colombia with the protests, and the platforms as well, the significance of everyone, every citizen being able to access multiple platforms to connect with Colombians and what was happening or is happening in the country. And I think, well, the videos have actually taken a very predominant role in getting the truth out there. And I guess that connects to me with what you were talking about, the storytelling not ending on what the filmmakers wants to, you know, to put it into image or in story, into film, but also continues in the way that citizens can engage with the storytelling very easily nowadays, no, with the use of cell phones, with mobile phones, with the use of with the access with you know, to these tools that makes you as a citizen very well with the resources to be able to tell the story on your own terms. And I think that's very powerful, and filmmakers have played a really important role as well in making those tools accessible to citizens around the world. So I think that's a point that I would like to come back later in the discussion if you're keen. And also I thought with the examples that you offered to us, for example, with the Staging Post, which I am very familiar with, a wonderful film, is that action can take many forms. When we're talking about political action, we might think about protests or civil unrest or changing political structures, but that action can also be at the very grassroots about, you know, people being able to tell their stories, people being able to change their immediate world. And I think we tend to sometimes, when we're talking about arts and the role of artists, to displace the conversation from the agency of citizens and how citizens can actually take action on their own terms and use the arts and the elements and the tools that arts give us to influence the change that they want. So I think that's really interesting, Guillermo, as well. Thank you. So now we are going to welcome Carlos Agames. So Carlos, the themes of home, memory, cultural displacement have been a constant in the work, and I have the privilege of seeing a lot of your work in the last few years and how these themes come up in the performances or in the film or photography works that you have shared with audiences across the world. Why do you think art is an essential tool for raising awareness about these topics? Because in the conversation that we have had, you have always said, I want people to know that this is happening. For example, in terms of the situation of refugees, the situation of people seeking asylum, or of internal displaced peoples in Colombia, which has been part of the work that you have presented and done previously. Why do you think that's important to raise awareness about these topics? We can't hear you. We cannot hear you. No. I think you need to change your settings.
Now?
Yeah, it's working now. Perfect. Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you to the all the artists and musicians that spoke before. I think I like when Justo finished saying that responsibility that as an artist we have. And I think what Guillermo says is very important, like how these days art is becoming more interactive, it's becoming more accessible. And it's not just that you're gonna sit down to watch a film, it's how you actually having that sort of bombarding of images of things happening in like social media and everything, how you can make a way within all of these things that are happening and bring the audience into it, like how the audience can be part of it more actively. I think that's really, really important, and that really resonates with my work. And I think when, as Carolina, I'm gonna go to the question now, is for me, it's important because back in Colombia, I was working with displaced people for a long time, and I was going to communities and I was just really, I don't even know the word, but shocked and really relate with all of the stories. And I guess it linked to my personal story of being, from somewhere and moving to different places and trying to, the bottom line of my work is how you as a displaced refugee citizen can make a concept of home when you haven't been in your home for a long time, or you haven't experienced that sense of belonging to a land or a place. And it comes also with the community or group that is around you. And I think for me, it's important, when I came to Australia to complete a scholarship, I went to work with an organization at one of the detention centers in Villawood here in Sydney, west of Sydney. And that really also it really impacted me. And I said, look, people needs to know what's happening. A lot of people in this country, I'm talking now about Australia, don't know that those stories are happening, don't know that there is a detention center inside of the city, don't know that the stories of people coming and fleeing from their places because their life have been threatened. And I think it's important that as an artist, we have this responsibility to voice certain topics or certain situations that are happening. And I think the big question for us as an artist is, how do we actually make it relatable to ourselves and to others? How do we translate what is happening into visual content or music content or word content that is not the same language that the media is using? How we actually can articulate that in a way that people resonate with it. And I think when Guillermo said that the film is so powerful because you sometimes, recently I watched the film when you can actually feel that you are the person sometimes, or that it's your friend, or it can be someone that you know. And therefore that really, I guess, awakening you the empathy. And that's where I think empathy comes and plays an important role, because as we have so many things happening, I guess the society now is becoming like less empathetic. Like people think, oh, that's not with me. I don't care. Like, it's not part of my family. It's not part of my circle of friends. What bother? And I think we need to, because we are humans, all of us. And what happened to me or what happened to you is going to have some mild repercussion in others. So for me, showing this, I guess, I make it really relatable to me, the concept of home, because I have experienced it myself. And every time I work with people that they have fleeing home because their life have been threatened, it's because I feel, I've been there. I can relate to your pain, and all I can do is use my tools, as Justo said before. Like, as an artist, we are tools. I think we are that vehicle that can translate all of these things that happen and put it into, I don't know, words. For me, it's the performance. And I can share maybe in a link one of my performance as well later in this conversation. But yeah, that's, I think, my response, how we make art more relatable to others and have this component of responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And I think, yeah, exactly what you said it. It goes back to responsibility, and how as artists and citizens, we have a responsibility to advocate for social justice, for human rights, for everyone, and for many other causes. And in the context of Colombia, where you and I come from, how we also have a responsibility to bring about that change that we want through storytelling and the different mediums that storytelling can take. So that's really powerful. I have seen your work on how, without being explicit, like arts, sometimes you can find these different perspectives of what arts can be. And it might be on your face. Sometimes you have, very powerful images, or we have songs that tell a very powerful story that really articulate what you want to say. But sometimes artists don't make things easier for us. And that's really important as well, because it makes us to reflect, it makes us to feel why is this conveying something to me. And that's really interesting as well. And I think that's something that is very particular in your work. So thank you, Carlos. So now we're going to welcome Dr. Fernanda Peñalosa. Fernanda is a researcher on Latin American cultural and knowledge and production of knowledge in the University of Sydney. And I would like to invite Fernanda to talk about something that also is very, or one of those elements that are also very important when we're discussing about arts and activism, and is the arts as a powerful vehicle for healing. So as Latin Americans, we have been going through very traumatic events in the past and in the present. And I believe that, well, the arts are certainly, well, again, we're going back to that word, are tools for engaging with those traumatic events or engaging with those situations of trauma. How we can, make that an effective way to overcome the trauma is the question. So what I would like to ask you is, what do you think is the role of artistic and cultural expression in overcoming individual and collective trauma in the context of Latin America and beyond?
Thank you, Carolina. And I would really like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Here I speak both from a place of privilege, but also from a place of displacement as an academic woman who doesn't identify with a dominant culture. So these contexts of influence and power are very rare for women like myself. And I think speak of, structures of power that are pretty much at the core of what we are witnessing happening in Colombia, but many other parts of the world, including Australia and the Latin American region overall. So I think since 1492, the region that we call Latin America has been suffering massacres, genocides, all forms of violations of human rights. And I think colonialism has created these structures that have been amplified by neoliberal models and also global capitalism. And of course, this not only has created structures of inequality, but I think has imprinted in our cultures a deep intergenerational wound. And those wounds are reopened every time there is an attempt to criminalize or terrorize demands for social justice and social change, which is, what our peoples have been doing effectively since the invasion of the continent. And I think, when we think about what we are witnessing in Colombia, these are moments of reflection of what have been, deep processes of exclusion and marginalization and invisibilization and silencing. And what our wonderful participants, Valentina, Justo, Guillermo, and Carlos have been saying here is that the possibility that art brings is to actually verbalize the unspeakable. The trauma becomes so deep, the wounds are bleeding, and the only way in which we can verbalize is not through the spoken word, it's not through rational thinking, it's really about visceral expressions of aesthetic sensibility. And I think that's quite clear in the interventions that preceded me. But also, you know, if we look historically about how cultures across the continent have been effectively resisting these forms of injustice, none of our cultures have been passive to these structures of inequality. And, you know, I was thinking, I was very deeply thinking, and it's quite emotional and moving for me to talk about these things. And I've been thinking, even, you know, if you look at the colonial art of 17th century in Cusco, where serpents and suns made their way through the depiction of virgins that were imposed from, you know, the Catholic priest over the indigenous populations. Or if we think about the movement of the arpilleras, where, you know, in dictatorial Chile, these brave, courageous women were crafting these incredibly powerful political messages through their brightly colored patchwork pictures, and everything before and everything beyond and in between these examples that I'm talking about. It's again about what we cannot express verbally, but we can actually represent in this visceral way. And I think in terms of, you know, how the vehicle of art becomes a platform to heal, I think it's so important for us to remember that there is tension, and there is also, I like this idea of I think Carlos mentioned this, or you, Carolina, that art is making us uncomfortable. And I think, you know, it's that through that aesthetic sensibility is to actually be fully aware of how stained, how impure our identities are in Latin America, because they come from this very act of dispossession, this act of violation. And I think it's reclaiming the body, reclaiming those unwanted identities from, you know, indigenous cultures, Afro-descendants, LGBTQIA+, women, all those unwanted others, reclaiming the body, because it's about that original memory of violation and all the different crimes that have been perpetrated against our peoples since then. So I think art is a way to achieve symbolic reparations for all those wrongdoings, and it gives us hope. It gives us hope that, you know, change is possible, and we need that. I mean, Valentina was talking about entertainment, but I think it's not only entertainment, but it's also reflection on, you know, how we can actually, through beauty, the beauty of her dance, the beauty of, you know, all these different forms of artistic expression, how we are compelled to verbalize in some way these deep wounds.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. I think that that's been it's been very deep, and also a really good summary of what we have discussed, and the speakers that have spoken so far have also put on the table. So you talk about responsibility again, you talk about representation, you talk about resistance, you talk about reflection, and also symbolic reparation, which I thought is a really, really interesting term, because we haven't really spoken about the symbolic. I mean, we wanted to talk about the political effects that arts have in the context of protest in this discussion, but obviously there's a lot to talk about the, you know, about the symbolics of what we have, of the cultural production that artists have put on displays through the latest 2 months in Colombia, and before, and Latin America and around the world, here in Australia as well. So I think that's a really important topic that is not really separate or exclusive topic when we're talking about the political effects of art, because I guess in the political, for me, there's also that preparation, how we're going to change the narrative about who we are and what we want. And I think that's really important because that's a political act per se, how arts represents who I am, who I belong to, and the change that I want. And I guess we're seeing those examples as you know, live, what's happening in Colombia, and that really is a really good way to go into Sarah's also opening remarks, because I wanted to talk with Sarah about well, how we're going to subvert those dominant narratives through art. So thank you, Fernanda. I think that was really powerful and lots to, you know, to think about as we go into the discussion. And Sarah, welcome again. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. I think your mic is still on mute. Thank you. So Sarah, street art in particular has been very has taken a very prominent, very visual role in the protests in Colombia. I mean, in Bogota, to give you an example, but this is actually something that is happening across cities and regions in Colombia, where the walls have been painted by graffiti artists, street artists, citizens who have joined a collective of artists to make their claims. Denouncing state violence and denouncing police violence has been a particular important topic that has been highlighted by these murals. If you Google, you know, murals, Colombian murals, you're gonna see a wide range of all those murals in the country, and how those murals sometimes also get censored by the local authorities or the police, and they get painted back again, and then they come back. So it's something that is happening, and it's a continuous of, again, symbolic representation, symbolic reparation in terms of how we're going to tell and who's going to tell the truth. One of the main streets in Bogota, for example, for me, a very powerful one actually is a huge mural on La Séptima, which is one of the main arteries in Bogota, in the capital in Colombia, which is painted with the number of people who has been forcibly disappeared in the last 4 decades of conflict in Colombia. And it's huge, you cannot avoid it. And I think that's just one example of what's been happening across the country, as I was saying. So Sarah, do you think of those examples in Bogota, in Cali, that I know you're more familiar with, in Medellin, in many regions in Colombia, and of the arts in general, as an effective platform for subverting the dominant narrative in Colombia and beyond? Australia is also, I guess, a really good landscape to talk about how we're subverting narratives. Sarah, over to you.
Okay, thank you everybody for the invitation and for your contribution so far. I honor the First Nations custodians where I'm sitting between salt and fresh water in Wobbegong and Worimi lands, and convoco las energías de mis abuelas, su fuerza, su persistencia, su sabiduría y su presencia, so that they acompañarnos hoy. And I also dedicate this to my comadres in Cali, who are in the primera línea, who are in the front line. So what we see in Colombia, and this is an ongoing logic of war and death, which is a really structured modern Colombian state and economy against its peoples, against its working class majorities of Afro, indigenous and mestiza descent, is an attempt to remove the color and the politics of life of its peoples. So at the moment, since the protests, we've seen more than like 1,000 disappeared. We've seen multiple assassinations. We've seen sexual violence. And we've seen the authorities and the military police have targeted the artists in Cali, which is the epicenter of the protest, for a number of reasons. And there's some incredible work being produced by the philosophers on the street there. Is they target the artists and they paint over the murals with gray. And they disappear the folks that are bringing the sound to the points of resistance where communities are defending their communities and also reoccupying the city. And often when we think of what's happening in Colombia, we think of this erasure, right? And we see this grayness. But of course, the reality from the communities who are resisting, who are re-existing, who are living everyday forms of sovereignty and autonomy and dignity is a politics where art is life and life is art. And this is a politics where we are all artists. So you will see in the points of resistance around Cali, a renaming of those points. So the Loma de Cruz, which is in the center of one of the parts of Cali, so it's the hill of the cross, has been renamed the Loma de la Dignidad. So it's the hill of dignity. And in the hill of dignity, you have the Biblioteca de la Dignidad, which is the library, the popular library of dignity. And you have murals, and you have ritual, and you have the frontline young folk who are defending their communities from this politics of death, right? And anti-life and this militarization, who are, despite and with the pain, articulating existentially, not just symbolically, existentially, another form of being and another form of doing. And this is reason. This is Black and Indigenous and working class reason. This is our theories, right? So you have absolutely beautiful, dignified storytelling as the women come with the saumerios, with the cleansing of the smoke and creating mandalas on the floor, where you recover over, right? You push back against this grayness and you say, we're here and we're not moving. And we are and have been living for decades other forms of community life and other forms of economy and other forms of care. And you have collective cooking, and you have the collective possibility of a deeply feminized, and some talk about decolonizing politics there, which means that necessarily we reimagine the political from these folks, you know, trying to show their truth and trying to show that they can prove the other wrong, and a logic of mastery and a logic of colonization and a logic of control. What we have is a politics of care and a politics of listening and a politics that weaves multiple tongues. So for me, that the art or the cultural is the existential, or for the comadres that work who have for decades, right, been doing this work, right? There's a massive long history there of this kind of often invisibilized politics, right? Often invisibilized politics of life. There is a coming into being, there is a dignity. There is not merely a resistance against power, even though you have to defend yourself against these brutal violences, right? There is also something other, as there is the reoccupation of space and the territories of the city, the territories of the country, the territories of the body, the territories of reason, the territories of politics. So I think one of the most amazing things about what's happening in the protests is this politics of life and dignity, is the role of the comadres, is the role of the indigenous Minga, is the role of the Caminando la Palabra and Caminando Juntos, the accompanying together, and that our politics is always going to have culture at the center. But culture not in the capitalist sense of culture, not in the colonial sense of culture, a culture that's for all of us and is of all of us, and it speaks ourselves into being.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That's very powerful. And I think you have also, I mean, when you talk about the politics of life and dignity, it really, you know, give me goosebumps, because I mean, for us, Colombians living in the diaspora, for Latin Americans living in the diaspora, for many people who's tuning in from Colombia, from around the world, what has happened has been really, I mean, it has been an eye-opener for many, because it has taken them out of their, you know, comfortable zone. For others who are more familiar with what's been happening in Colombia for decades, I mean, as you're saying, I mean, we're talking about these fights, about these issues for many years. This is not something that started 2 months ago. So it's been really powerful to see what's happening, and in these locations that Sarah mentioned, how the renaming of these particular sites of resistance have, you know, taken the imaginary of many Colombians, and how we relate to those places. So I think that's really interesting to highlight here, on how culture plays an important role there in the way that we relate to each other, not as the commodification of culture, which is something that we've been used to, how we consume and you know, exchange money for culture, if you like, but culture as something that we live every day, and that makes us who we are. So dignity, I guess I like to go back to that point with you all, when we're talking about responsibility, when we're talking about, you know, dignity, how we're going to all together work towards a world where there's dignity for everyone, an agency, and we can, in a way, dismantle those structures of power. I mean, that could sound utopia for many, it could be. But I think these steps are being taken by people in Latin America, by people in Asia, by people in Africa, by people here in Australia. So I think there's a change. There is a way for change, but how we are as artists contributing to that change. And I guess that's the question that I would like to open to you all, whoever wants to comment on that. And I also going to check whether we have any questions from the audience on Facebook as well. We have, well, it's 12:20, so we have 10-15 minutes, if that's okay with you. We go over for 5 minutes maybe, and we can also answer some of the questions from the people who have kindly joining us this morning. So who would like to comment on something while I check the questions? Justo, please.
Yes, I was listening to everybody. Really was quite educational, the way everybody spoke from their particular perspective. But I would like to focus into a couple of things that people say. Fernanda spoke about displacement. Carlos talked about the refugees in Australia. And Sarah talked about the front line. Now, for me, very key issues, front line, you know, because the front line at this moment in Colombia are the people who are in the front line, obviously, and in Chile and in all Latin America. But as displaced people, because in this webinar, we are all displaced. Some people are refugees, some people are migrants, and some people are just displaced, professionally displaced. What's our role here as well? Then it's good that this webinar was done in English. That was my first question before we started. What language? Because at the moment we are here, and as we are here, what's our responsibility, not only with our countries, but also with the issues of Australia? Like Australia at the moment has a very poor policies with the Aboriginal community, genocidal, I would say. What they're doing to refugees is disgusting, is embarrassing from a human rights perspective. And also Australia historically has participated, or at least is alleged to have participated in some of the coups state in our countries. Like a lot of information is not out about the Australian role in the coup in Chile in 1973. And there are issues that as artists, like we are not in the front line in our countries, but somehow, often we are in the front line here. And this is an opportunity to utilize some of the elements that were thrown in this conversation to bring it back to the country we're living in, because this webinar is organized from a Colombian organization from Australia to respond to issues in Latin America, but also somehow we are responding to issues in Australia. That's all. I wanted to focus in those three elements that I couldn't stop thinking about Australia when I was listening to these comments.
Thank you, Justo. Anyone who would like to comment on what Justo just said?
Yeah, I this is an ongoing problem, existential thing of my life. I am diasporic. I am mestizaje in so many ways, and I have these lineages of displacement. And so for me, one of the roles I've always played, I was always in between communities and languages and cultures and classes. And sometimes that's a very painful experience because you don't belong. But then what does it mean to turn that into a possibility of bridging, of communicating between unexpected subjects and communities that might not otherwise speak, and to translate like a translator, as a popular educator too. So for me, the communities and the kin that I've really most identified here, being a raised kind of Indigenous mestiza woman, has been Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal sisters, and the struggles for the healing of the traumas of displacement, the struggles for the healing of the traumas of exile, the ways in which this crisscrosses our communities and our families, and how the struggle for sovereignty and recovery of our territories is at the heart of this. So a lot of my practice here is the sharing across our lineages, because Indigenous practice is very much a practice of gift, right? It's not of possession. It is responsibilities and gift and opening. And so even with everything that was happening in Colombia, for example, there was Warramai kin over the waters there with some other folk, and we did a ritual of solidarity and healing to the comadres in the communities there in Cali and in broader Colombia, and we weaved our different traditions and offerings onto this land, and we sent those energies, and we embodied the practices in mirror and in diversity to create the bridges and the threads of our telarañas, of our webs, right? And the struggle for sovereignty here, and the honoring of the everyday sovereignties and the Black theory and the Black life that is present here is very central to my practice. And a big resonance, because they've also held me and my family in our own healing. And I really honor that, and thank any of my kin here who might be watching this or might watch this afterwards for that gift. Sometimes our healing happens in displacement in an interesting way, as we find home in multiple forms and in multiple territories, that we're not necessarily one territory, but yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, yeah, that multiplicity of being is really interesting and very relevant to this conversation when we're talking about art, right? Well, I want to go into some of the comments and questions from the audience, if that's okay. But we have Eleonora saying, yes, indeed, change must start in our own backyard. So really relevant to the discussion. We have a question from Vale. Do you think, is it possible that our protests can change for good our way to stand up completely, so violence become unnecessary? Who would like to answer that question?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I do think it can have an impact on showing a way of manifestation that is more passive and kind than to not have to get to the aggression. Of course, this is something that is it's a very complex and delicate topic, considering that when things are really bad and people is going through a very hard situation and everything has been dismissed in the big social conflict, the manifestations start getting to different levels. However, talking as an artist, I do believe, and that's actually my intention, is just like we have the resources, and just as Sarah was saying, that sometimes the fact that we are in both countries and everywhere and nowhere, it can be a bit of an existential problem, but it can be also possibilities to connect. So as artists, definitely we can use our resource to do changes. Because just with this video, I feel I am satisfied with the people that I have reached to and how they have come to just ask what's going on. Yeah, which was exactly what I wanted to. I don't have the truth. I'm not in Colombia, so I might not even know exactly what's going on, but I want to get that question so people can research and have some curiosity about it. And the other thing is, a part of just being artists, if we are artists in other country, I think the responsibility is even bigger, because let's say you have your people in Colombia, you have your people in Australia, so you have a wider access to share information and that message that you want to give through art. So definitely it is possible to do a change. And I actually invite all the artists, not just dancers, that have been maybe afraid or not feeling worth of doing movement about that. It's a hard work, but as long as you create the team you need, there's so many things that you can do with the talent you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. That's very important invitation to everyone who's joining us today. I can see many artists have tuned in, so that's great. We have another question from Gina, I think. Just gonna read it. Art has a great power of transformation in society in different senses from different settings. What aspects in the artistic role should be improved or focused to contribute to help solve many of the problems of violence, corruption in Latin America? Anyone? Guillermo?
Well, great question. All great questions. I think that it points to the audience. It always points to the audience. Who is our audience to receive the message? And how do we cut through to that audience? Be that a community organization, an activist organization, is it a group of mothers who are valiantly, amazingly, fighting for all sorts of rights? Is it government? Is it local government? So I think to pinpoint the answer to this is to work out what is my target audience, how do I understand my audience, how do they speak, how do they listen, and finding as much, there's that line in The Godfather, you know your enemy more than you know your friend. So how do you know your audience? And in that way, that will inform, I don't have the answers obviously, but once you know your audience, then you can have an understanding of how to talk to them. Be that in so many different ways, be there through social media, video production, protests, etc. How do we get to that? How do we break through? Because we can spend all of our time doing what we love to do, but are we making change? Are we making social change? Are we reaching our audience? How are we doing this? And it's about testing, always looking into what we're doing. Are we reaching? Are we reaching? Are we reaching? And that will inform, I think, any artistic aspect of reaching for social change.
Thank you, Guillermo. And I think that goes back to, the urgency of art production. I mean, when we have seen also what was happening in Colombia with the police killing protesters with no justice at all, no investigations. There's no accountability of what's happening, the violence exercised by the state and the police and the armed force in Colombia. So I guess that goes back to that sense of responsibility from artists, but also the sense of urgency of art, and how we're going to put the art in a way that can enact change in a very quick way. So what you were saying about reaching out to audiences, who our audiences are, it makes me think as well how as artists and producers, the people behind or supporting artists to produce work, how can we put processes in place where we know that there are ethical considerations on how we relate to, the citizens that we want to highlight issues from, but also with the audiences. Sometimes the images that you can find online are really traumatic or can trigger trauma in people who are seeing them. So there's, I guess, a balance that perhaps we need to pinpoint in terms of urgency and those considerations as artists and arts workers reaching out those audiences, as I guess. Okay, anyone, Justo? I see your open mic, so I was wondering. Would you like to comment on anything? Just checking if there were any other questions. Justo?
I hear the word violence and violence coming up in different comments, and as a kind of also an opposition between violence and culture. The violence is not generated by these uprisings. The uprising is a response to violence. Like, if we're going to talk about the world, and in particular the third world, and in particular Latin America, we're suffering hunger. People are displaced, people are discriminated, racially discriminated. The youth doesn't see a future. They're stolen our future. Then I don't know how many people have been into a march here or in Latin America or somewhere else in the world. You are confronted with bullets. You are confronted with sometimes rubber bullets. In Colombia and Chile, they are pointing towards your eyes. How many people have lost their eyesight in Chile? How many people have been killed? And it was mentioned the issue of the people disappeared in Colombia and Chile as well. It's not only in those two countries, but it's kind of focus of today. That's violence. That's violence. The pencils and the guitars and the strings and the pigeons are very nice, to express ourselves on a stage. But when you go to a march, even if you have a beautiful guitar or you're a very good graffiti artist, you're going to be confronted with bullets. For me, that is violence. None of us, or none of the artists is a violent person who wants to respond violently to violence. But sometimes you have to run, sometimes you have to defend yourself, sometimes you have to go to the front line, and sometimes you have to kick back the bombs that are thrown at you. Yes, the word violence against culture and culture, the contradiction between violence and culture is something that worries me. I wanted to make that comment about violence. That's all.
So go. You want to go, Valentina? Or should?
Yes. Just a quick
okay, go.
Sorry. Just related with the last question we had, when it said that what is the things that artists do we have to improve in order to make this happen? And one of the things that came to my mind is, as you mentioned, the word ethics and the responsibility that we have in the information that we're actually delivering. So we do have this resource through art to maybe have access to people or to share and have a symbolic impact through what we do and everything. But there is a very complex line between like the impact we're crossing the impact we can have, and what type of information and the responsibility we are delivering. In this sense, I think what we have to improve is just to be not just, we artists can be very passionate about what is happening and sharing things with all the emotions that characterizes us. But having a multidisciplinary team and doing these type of art manifestations in a teamwork, I think is responsible, and it makes it easier. Our field is in our area is dancing, is a talent, and it's all that, but it might not be the social, it might be the political one, and we might have like personal opinions on it. So my perspective, like before I did this project that I got committed with for the video, I tried to reach people that had experience as you guys, you know, the social and political area, to be sure that I am sharing information that is responsible while I doing my artistic expression.
I was just gonna say, you know, we're all storytellers and all our stories matter. And these will necessarily be through multiple tongues. And that for me is where we build our webs of dignity and re-existence and life here with Colombia, in Colombia. And the, you know, something that always my hermanas, my comadres there in Cali are always talking to me about is the fact that that this is a politics of life against this machine of kind of anti-life, and that they're poetizando la vida. I don't know how you say it. You're making the life as poetry. You know, you're also embodying with the guns, with the rubber bullets, with the blood. You're also embodying, even on the front lines, right? A multiplicity of like community building that's going on there, building on what's already being done. And it makes me think of some of the mujeres of the Cauca, and the song, the Afro-Colombian women, and the songs which are speaking of the pain, right, at the mass assassinations that have been going on before the uprising, the people's, you know, reclaiming and reoccupying, and just how there is this in journeying with the grief and in speaking the grief, you are also, there is a life there. There is this delicacy of life and its preciousness and this joy that they're often, alegría, no? That's side by side. So there's such a complexity and so much to be learned as well about how it is that we heal our communities here, which are, you know, suffering, and all the violence is here that Justo was talking about. So I also think there's so much to be learned from the illumination of the practices of the women and men and communities on the front line.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that I go in a moment, but I think that actually answers one question that Jacqueline has also put in the chat. She's asking, in a world that has become desensitized, how do you artists change the narrative, change the language? It's a very big question. Yeah, Jacqueline, I think you, Sarah, has highlighted there a few points, right? How art is a space of resistance, but it's also a space of hope, of dignity, of changing the narratives, but changing the narratives from within. And I think in a way, that's how the language change, how we can actually learn from the people on the ground to change the narratives, predominant narratives, and the inequalities that exist in those, how those narratives get to you know, to people, and what narrative is more important than the other, right? So Justo, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm interrupting. It's not you. I only wanted to mention 3 videos. I put in the comments, I put 3 videos because I believe that we are in Australia. The first one I put, it was about La Peña. And La Peña is an organization who did a lot of the things we're talking about. Then I made a video 15 years ago, and the interviews are as old as 1980, I believe, of people of the Latin American community and the things they were doing in those days. I think it's important for all these people who is interested in this conversation to go back to what we used to do 40 years ago. The second video put is one that SBS did when SBS had a different kind of editorial line, and it's about music and politics. And they talked about Latin America, and I copied the video, put it in my channel. It's an interesting discussion, and a few people involved with the culture and Latin American politics in Australia speak about that. There are a few international artists as well in that one. And the last one I put is a march of the Aboriginal people, not last year, I think the year before, just for people to hear how the Aboriginals express their reality in this country. And I have to say there are a few Latin Americans deeply involved in the Aboriginal struggle here. I wanted to comment about these 3 comments or videos I posted in the comments of this discussion.
Thanks so much, Justo. And for everyone who's interested in those videos, I believe you have posted them on the live feed, right?
Yep.
Everyone is interested. Well, I think we're running over time, but I'd just like to close with a really interesting question from Carolina. She's asking, another Carolina.
Okay.
Unfortunately, having access to meaningful art is a privilege in many places. How do you think we can break the privilege to make it more democratic? And I think, Fernanda, you touched this when you spoke about how we're situating ourselves in a place of privilege. We're all talking here from the comfort of our homes, from Australia, and in a way, I know everyone has different fights and stuff going on in their lives, but we in a way can go on in our lives very comfortably here. And I think that's a really important question on how privilege in a way sets the way that we engage with art here in Australia and in many places in Colombia too. So who would like to answer this very, very difficult question, but very important?
Since you mentioned my name, I just wanted to say that the definition of art that we've been using here is not one that comes from privilege. It's one that comes from the impulse, the compelling sort of call that people feel to actually collectively create narratives that counter-attack those narratives that are dominant and are totally in alignment with forms of impunity, of corruption, of violence, of state-led terrorism against the citizens that states should be protecting. So I think also this idea that art has to be meaningful or has to have that sort of association with privilege comes actually from dominant discourses. And one of the challenges that I think we have, particularly in spaces of privilege like academia, is to remind ourselves constantly that the challenges to dominant discourses comes from actually people who don't necessarily have privilege. And I think it's very, it's essential and it's urgent for us to think about art in a way that we've been talking about here, which is about the collective responsibility to create hope, to create social change, to create social justice. So it's not that art of the museum, it's the art that occupies social space to legitimize the voices of those who are being constantly silenced by repressive forms of domination, which are often state-led, but also are led by private sectors. We talk about global capitalism, we're talking here about interests that perpetuate themselves trying to create those spaces of privilege that I was talking before.
Yes, certainly it is, and that's a really good way to I guess close this conversation. I guess the issue of privilege is really interesting as well, because as you were saying, yeah, we're talking about art that is happening in communities, that is happening from a place of resistance and hope and dignity. But there's also, for me, the issues that are happening at the level of the museum, of the art that is displayed in the museum, how we can democratize that art or that access to culture, so it's equal for everyone, and the different inequalities that are in culture as well. Not everyone has access to resources to produce art, not everyone has the time, very important resource, to engage with art, because life is sometimes overwhelming as well. Photo, I think it's Guillermo's telling me. Anyway, I think it's a really good way to close this conversation, because I think we have really highlighted really important points, and I hope you in your homes, you're taking some reflections with you. With this panel, what we wanted to do is to unpack different elements that come together when we talk about arts and activism. So we're talking about responsibility, resistance, hope, dignity. And we have also talked about healing, changing the narrative, subverting the narratives. Resistance is something that came up, obviously, really a lot of times in what you have said. The power of art, I think, is not something that we're debating here. We know it, the power of art is a given. How we use that power, I guess, is the question that I would like you and everyone to take home and reflect on how we, as audience, as artists, as workers and citizens, we engage with that power. Thank you, everyone. Unless you have anything else to say, comment. Everyone, okay. You want to take a photo, I think, of everyone. Is that what you were saying, Guillermo? I wasn't sure. Yeah.
No, I could make a last comment.
Yeah, sure, Justo, please.
We're living in a country, because we're all in Australia, that doesn't have a Ministry of Culture. That shows the importance this country gives to culture. If you want to see art, unless you can afford the $100 or $70 it costs to go to a concert today, most people can't, I suggest that you join a march. And next time there is a march for Colombia, for Chile, for Peru, for the Aboriginals, just go to the march and you're going to be exposed to culture. You can participate, you can bring your guitar, you can bring your video camera or your telephone, and I'm sure you can do something really relevant and participate of a culture in movement. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Justo. So thank you, everyone, to each of you, Valentina, Justo, Sara, Fernanda, Carlos, and Guillermo, for joining us today. To the audience, I'm sorry I didn't go through all the comments. Many people who joined us today wrote really interesting comments on the live feed. If you would like to have a look at them and respond to them, it's up to you. Thank you so much for that level of engagement. This is what we wanted, a conversation. Unfortunately, how Mario mentioned at the beginning, we couldn't do this face-to-face, but fortunately we have the means to connect with each other through Zoom or whatever. I particularly want to say thank you to the people in Colombia who joined us today. Thank you for supporting us. We are with you, and big hugs and solidarity with all the people in Colombia, in the regions and in the cities. Over to you, Mario. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carolina. And it's fascinating to hear all what every single speaker have shared today. I think that as an organization, as a Colombian myself, as an immigrant, as a human citizen, it is inspiring to hear. And actually, there's so many questions that stay there And I think that the way that culture combines your contribution as a protest, as a reflection, as an inspiration, a way of healing, it is precisely the way that cultural mediation could come aboard in interdisciplinary equipments or teams, as Valentina mentioned, with a strategic focus, for example, Fernando said about, Guillermo said about shared thinking in your audience of precisely rewrite or transform different paradigms that we get used to, as Fernanda mentioned, of the heavy lift of colonialization, the importance of making memory and carry on that important heritage, that culture and diversity, put it together instead of putting us away, as Sarah precisely said to you. Maestro Justo, it has been a valuable, extraordinary, I listen to you, the way that you bring art as a tool, and it's an important tool definitely to transform that healing, but also to inspiring. And I think that this is a way, and as organization, along with Carlos mentioned to you, and also as well Carolina, that we want to do is try to engage and put in interdisciplinary people and minds to have important conversations in difficult times. For difficult times, we need to bring on board difficult conversations. And of course, the narratives have to be brought from different angles and perspective. I think that art, it is a way to escalate human rights and de-escalate violence. And that's something that our context, particularly these days, requests. Escalate the human rights. And I think that from the activist perspective, we ask governments, we have international organizations to help us to see that. It is not fair, first of all, that people have to sacrifice life just raising the voices for something that is democratic to do. The respect of life, the respect of the protests. These protests at the end, what they are aiming to do is just change structural problems that has been held for so many years. And Latin America has been through those moments in different times. We understand what happened in the dictatorships during the 70s and 80s in Central America as well. Colombia, it is a crucial time. A lot of people, unfortunately for the media, it is focusing in the unfortunate moments of violence that has been happening. Unfortunate, and they are unfortunate because there is many people who has been affected by violence. Civilians as well, members of the forces, excess of force as well. And there is no way that in 21st century, we still have these dialogues. We cannot tolerate any kind of violence. And we, of course, protest against any kind of violence. I have to thank everyone. I need to as well thank all the collaborative team that were behind scenes to organize the EXPRESARTE for Colombia second edition that unfortunately it was canceled. We have an extraordinary artistic lineup of performances. So we all hope to see you on another time because we will see you for sure. We would like to thank as well Addison Road Community Center, which is one of our main allies in facilitating the human rights conversation and these peace building activities. Of course, definitely a deep thank to Colombian Cultural and Folkloric Organization, and of course our Sandra Lucas, who is an extraordinary human being, an example of women, powerful women, and art and cultural mediator too. As well, all the UFCA or United for Colombia team that is permanently bringing questions, strategies, or ideas. We definitely thank you to the audiences in Colombia, in your countries. We ask you please to do what you need to do to survive the pandemic. We need to do our best, but the most important thing is just to remember that human rights is not something vertical. Human rights is something horizontal that starts from ourselves. Self-care, self-conscious, and as, for example, as the Professor Fernanda said, the way of art, we have art ourselves. Life is art. Life is a struggle. life is inspiration and life is beautiful. So thank you, Carolina, especially for you to make this happening too. And for all of you guys, thank you for sharing your time. We will be very happy to see you and hope to see you in another time for sure.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias.
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 Thank you.
Gracias.
Vamos.
Okay, life is finished.
Vamos.
Wow, thank you so much. Oh my God, extraordinary, guys.
Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Carolina.